Welcome to the Building Doctor Show with Jens Johansson.
Okay, welcome to the Q&A. Our first question is, what do you guys do as building consultants, and what can I consult on from you? How are you different than contractors or builders? Great question. We get asked this so much. Why do I need an architect? Why do I need an architect? Why can't the contractor just do it? I've got a proposal. He says he knows what to do. So we are architects and engineers, and we figure out, number one, we figure out independently what is wrong. And so we're not selling you anything. We're not, a roofer makes money selling you roof products. And so what if that roof to wall is not integrated right? They can put a new roof down, but the siding transition between the roof and the wall. Or if we're just selling windows, everything's a window problem. What's that phrase? To a carpenter, every problem is a nail, or every solution is a hammer, right? So we independently figure out what's wrong. And it's usually a variety of things and how they integrate. Second, we prepare and stamp the plans and specs for permits and contracts. And people say, why do I need plans? Plans are the recipe. They tell you step by step what to do. They give the contractors a graphical representation of how we want it to look, what the colors are, where things stop and start. And so everybody benefits from a good set of plans and a detailed set of specifications. We don't have to overdo them, but it answers all the questions of your WRB has to lap the flashing. The flashing has to be this tall. It has to stay this far off of the trim. It has to have these bends and folds, and sealant goes here and doesn't go there, things like that. And so then that set of plans and specs is tied to the contract. So I, the contractor, shall follow this recipe and give you a completed project. So if anything were to happen in the future, well, these new windows weren't installed right. Well, they didn't follow plans. Oh, and it's in the contract. So now they're in breach of contract. And so you have a little bit more, you have some authority to say it's not done because it's not done per the plans and specs that are tied to your contract. So third thing, we obtain competitive bids and compare the quotes received for an apples to apples comparison. We try to go out and get 3 bids and say, hey, look, they're all within 5 or 10% of each other. That means they're looking at the same set of documents. And, but why does this contractor have this exclusion when that exclusion is clearly in the plans and specs or the recipe we told them to do? So they can't exclude it and be compliant with the bid documents, right? So we have a trained eye. We can go through their proposals, see what they're, know what they've included, what they haven't, what they've missed. We can call them back and say, hey, did you realize you have to do this? And it's on page 4 of the set of plans. Oh, I didn't. Okay, thanks for saving me money or a fight later. And so we can help you put all those together, compare apples to apples, and then you guys can choose which contractor you want. And we like to say you'll choose the most responsive contractor. It doesn't mean you're choosing the lowest bid. And then oftentimes, we'll do that comparison, and then we'll say, let's interview the top 2 and just see if you have some chemistry with them. See if, tell them to bring their project managers and superintendents to the meeting or the interview. And we can kind of see if we have, can get along with these folks. They're probably going to be working on our property for 6 to 12 months. And so we can help you get through that. Then after you've selected a contractor, we act as your owner's rep and help you oversee the work, oversee the contractor's questions, answer any contractor questions. They're called RFIs. Make sure they do their submittals and their mock-ups. Here's the plans and specs say I got to use, this type of sealant. Is that the right sealant you want me to use? And you say, yes, use this color, use this shade or this type of paint and things like that. So we help you through these kind of monthly pay applications. We help you through any kind of change orders, or, we opened up the building, we found a whole bunch of surprises, and we have some questions. We got to get them answered. We'll be your owner's rep and make sure those things get answered. And and then make sure the project gets done right this time. So, fifth reason, we understand how boards work. We understand insurance and claims and how they work, and how loans and or utility rebates work to help you find more money for your repairs. And so we can explain an overview of the loan process and then put you in touch with good lenders that'll help you. We understand the how boards work and how they need to get things approved and voted on and help you with HOA meetings and present to your HOA, big meeting and just kind of walk you through this whole process. And then after the work is done, the last thing, we can stay connected with you. We view the board as our client and the property really as our client. And because boards come and go, managers come and go, but we have ongoing relationships with the properties over the past 20 years and can say, yeah, we worked on your building 5 years ago. Here's all the information that we gave to you at that time. Well, the board's changed 3 times in that time. The manager's changed a few times. We as the new board didn't have any of that information. Oh, that's great. You have it. You know exactly what's going on. Here's what the last board was struggling with. Here's what they were working on. Here's how they were trying to, get these done or what they were thinking in kind of this phased repair process. So we can stick with you and help you stay on top of stuff. So we've worked with thousands of boards, and through this experience, we can help you get this done right the first time and avoid costly mistakes and kind of if it's your first rodeo and you are a volunteer board member and you don't have to become an architect and an engineer and a contractor overnight to figure out how to do this. We can walk you through the whole process and you can decide where to use us. Okay, next question. What are the factors that typically influence the cost and timeline for building repairs? There's about 3 answers to that. So factors influence cost. How much damage do you have requiring repairs? And that's found through our initial investigation where we kind of take off some of the siding and see what's going on underneath. Do we have water damage or rotten sheathing, bad framing, just all sorts of surprises. And then we can help build your scope of repairs saying it's not just siding, it's 20% of the framing or it's 10% of this. Or now that we're getting into that, we see that that's not the best way to do it. So maybe there's a code change that made things safer and better. Do we have to follow that code process? Things like that. Existing buildings do have existing building code. So just because you touched it doesn't mean you have to bring it up in all cases. So the first one is how much damage do you have? The second one is how many defects do you have that will lead to water intrusion or further damage? Meaning, is what we call in the business a full strip and reclad necessary, where I have to pull off all the stuff to get to all these defects all over the place? Or can we do just a targeted repair? Maybe this is just limited to the deck stacks are leaking. And so we can just really focus in on the decks and maybe how it ties into the siding. And we don't have to worry about the windows or, maybe your community was built in phases. And phase 2 was just a really bad contractor or set of subs that were terrible. But phases 1, 3, 4, and 5 are great. It's really focused on phase 2. Let's fix those buildings. And so we can help you do, a targeted repair or a complete strip and reclad, depending on how many little defects you have. If you have reverse lap flashings and just problems everywhere, it starts getting to this metric of if I'm pulling off 60-70% of the siding, it's almost the same price as pulling it all off. And then I have all new warranties, all new life cycles, just everything instead of a patchwork quilt, if you will. So can we do targeted or do we have to go full strip and reclad? And kind of the third reason that affects costs and timeline is how long the selected contractor's duration is, because we're typically hired to oversee their work. So a contractor that can bring a big crew in and get this job done in 4 months versus a smaller contractor with a small crew, but they're going to take 10 months. So the pricing may be different with the contractors, but you also want to look at our timeline as overseeing them during the repairs. So of course you'll have to pay for 6 more months of our time watching things. But there's pros and cons. If we have to send out two, consultants a week to keep track of, 6 buildings under construction, or can just one consultant per week keep track of, one building going on at a time. So those are different things, and that's how we help fine tune our proposal process when it comes to the construction oversight phase. We really look at the contractor you've selected, how long is their schedule, and assuming you want us there to watch their work and make sure they do it right this time, uh, that'll drive some of those costs. So damage, defect, and duration. Okay, next question. What do board members and the managers need to know about the useful life of building components, and how can they plan proactively to avoid costly surprises? Good one. So the useful, we call it remaining useful life or useful life. Forgive my throat. So I'm going to refer you to our maintenance plan, and we'll put that in the chat for you. So it gives remaining useful life or useful life timelines. And so I just want to take a few components that are on the outside of your building. So think about windows. A typical window has a 20-year lifespan, and that's all the accessories and the weather stripping and the rubber and the sealants and the latches and the things like that. We know the glass lasts for a long, long time, or the frame maybe is not rotting and failing, but how that window is built. So windows, think 20 years. Well, the siding that the windows are next to has 40 years. But the paint that's on the siding and the paint and sealants have 5 to 10 years. And that window in the siding may be right above a deck. So a deck membrane has 5 to 10 years. And so we've got all these things. A roof over the top of this deck and siding and windows and walls has 15 to 25 years, depending on the type of shingle, excuse me, or roof membrane. So we always want to be looking at these things and say, this has a 5-year life cycle. If the deck starts leaking and then it gets underneath the siding and damages everything and rots out everything, I've got to pull off that perfectly good siding that has a remaining 40 years or 35 years because the water got in and damaged the framing. So I got to pull the siding off to replace the framing. Then I can put new siding back on, all because you forgot to recoat your decks, or the decks were done wrong or something like that. Or you failed to restore your sealant and water got in. So the big thing there is building maintenance components work together. And so we can, with that maintenance plan and that eye to, annual inspections or biannual, every other year, we can keep an eye on that. Another interesting situation, we see roofs with an attic and the attic ventilation is done wrong. The roof shingle maybe has a 50-year lifespan. But if that attic ventilation is done wrong, like the eave vents are blocked with too much insulation, or there's bath fans disconnected, making everything moldy in the attic, that roof sheathing gets all rotten and spongy. Now I got to tear perfectly good shingles off to replace the roof sheathing and then put new shingles back on it. So that's how we see, overlapping things. So just because one thing has a 40-year lifespan doesn't mean everything has it. So staying on top of that maintenance. So the second question, how is the component installed? So if it has, if it was installed wrong or poorly, it's not going to last its expected life. New construction is unfortunately known for cheap price, and defects are the most, more common. Repairs to one condition may not contemplate or consider needed repairs to other areas. So an incomplete repair can allow problems to persist and repairs needing to be redone. And so you can kind of get into this confusing, well, I just repainted everything. Well, you painted over the rotten siding, or the siding was over a defectively installed WRB or building paper or Tyvek. And, we got to tear that stuff off to get to that because something wasn't installed correctly. So that's the component of that oversight piece that we were talking about earlier. If you're having somebody making sure the contractors are cutting corners, making sure they're following a good written set of plans and specs, making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do and follow the contract, you won't have these defects. And so that's why we advocate for us to watch. Third thing is to be proactive about it. The reserve study is a good tool to plan for lifespan issues, but we see many studies or repeated, every 3 years, you're supposed to get your reserve study updated. And so we see them going through the exercise of just updating timeframes. And so here was your last reserve study. I just need to change the dates and change the times. And they don't bother really going to the site and really looking around or making sure you do a little building envelope investigation to confirm that things are okay. Because again, that siding has 40 years. We did that reserve study 3 years ago. So you should have 37 years left. Done. Well, are you? And so did somebody verify and make sure all these things are working together? Along that reserve study, make sure your reserves are adequately funded so that you have a budget and bank account to work with. And so this is the proactively avoiding costly surprises. So your reserve study is setting aside, my roof will last 40 years. So I have 39 years left to save for a new roof. So every year for 39 years, I'm taking out a little bit of money and putting it into the roof bank account line item as a part of my reserve study, so that when I get to the end of that time period, I have an adequately funded section to just take from that and fix my roof. So we're seeing lots of properties lately with underfunded reserves as a result from, all the way back to 2008 housing crisis, COVID, other inflation hangovers, and they've just said, hey, it's good enough. We're kind of struggling here. Let's not even look at it. Let's not update our savings. Let's not increase our dues and assessments to set aside proper money. And they're waking up realizing they're 15% funded. So we want you to be at that 50+%. The industry says 70% is a real good number. 100% I think is a little overkill. But if you have some money, maybe you don't have all of it, but you have some money, it reduces in your reserves, it reduces the assessment or the costly surprise, if you will. And then ways to avoid these: update and monitor reserve study, have biannual property inspections by a building envelope consultant, and be cautious of low bid without a set of plans or oversight. And that we're talking about the circle of how these things go together. As long as I'm capturing these things at the start, they won't come to fruition. Okay, last question. How can boards and managers improve communication with their communities about budgeting for repairs, inspections, and long-term maintenance? So this gets back to that, what I was talking about, these inflation hangovers, or any kind of economic crisis. Nobody wants to hear that they need to pay more money into a system when no real repairs are needed right this second. I've got plenty of other bills to pay. Or you get that promise of no new taxes under my watch from the incoming president, and you're kind of like, prices were up from last year and they're up from 5 years ago. So why are we still operating on no increases for the past 10 years? I have a feeling we're behind. So budget season requires annual budget planning, and that's budget, but also take some time to include reserve study and really looking at the reserve study. Put those two together because they're about your financial picture, right? So making sure that study has its timelines and allowances for repairs, and the assumptions it's making are correct. And again, your reserves are 50+% funded, and that's what new buyers are looking at. They're saying, hey, what are your dues? How much is the property? And then where's your reserves at? Do you have absolutely no money in your account? So if you go to mow the lawn, you're going to have to give me an assessment, and I'm just going to be pelted to death with little assessments about everything. Not to mention, we have no money set aside for when the roof needs to be replaced or the decks need to be replaced. And so do that annually and talk about it. Talk about it in the meetings or the town halls. We call town halls as open HOA forums. Hey, here's what the board is struggling with. Hey, here's what we're working on. It looks like we're going to be going here and here. Stay tuned for, a vote once we get, actual numbers. Then you have the special meeting where you're actually voting. People have heard about this for a long time. 3 to 6 months. They know it's coming. They can start planning for it and start thinking about it. But we have a community communication tool. We'll put that in the chat for you. But monthly email newsletters, don't underestimate them. Here's the highlights. It's not board meeting, but it's just here's the highlights in our community. Here's what we're looking at fixing this year. There's going to be some costs for this, and we're talking about doing the roofs next year. We'll patch all the little annoying little leaks that people are starting to get this year, but stay tuned. We'll do a big roof job next year. Those town hall meetings to discuss and not vote, and then official meetings to vote good measures in. And so just to, keeping people informed. Unfortunately, we do work with boards that say, I don't want to tell anybody because I'll just get all these questions or I'll get, second guessing. And yeah, I mean, you got to remind people sometimes of we were elected to make these decisions. However, we want your input and we want you to know what we're working on here. So everybody's informed. We're not hiding any secrets. We're following the rules. So that's how boards and managers can improve communication. All right, great questions. So did you know we have free and paid training for boards and managers? So if you want to type, you can type in learn.j2consultants.com/resources, or you can use your little phone if you don't like to type and scan that QR code. So you'll find free training and resources on our website. And if you want some kind of more board coaching, give us a call and we'll walk you through that. We can work with you more in depth, one-on-one. We may recommend a site visit so we actually can see what's going on. We can talk to you. We can dig into your reserve study and just be the advocate in your corner to say, here's what, you should start doing. Here's how I would address that and give you some advice that way. Okay, then don't forget to stream us. We're on all the favorite podcast places. And, do us a big favor. Give us that 5-star review. That gives us fuel to create more stuff. And you can enter your questions, I think, on any of these platforms. And our team of people will see all these questions. Here's a question from Spotify. Here's a question from YouTube. Here's a question from wherever. And we'll throw those into the thing. So thanks for tuning in to our amazing audience. Thank you very much. Your engagement, your questions, and your trust in us to guide you through the challenges of managing and maintaining your building mean a lot to us. The show wouldn't be possible without you, and we're really grateful to have you part of the Building Doctor community. As we look ahead to 2025, we're excited to bring you even more valuable content, expert advice, and solutions to help your buildings and communities thrive. So let's work on our goals, dream big, and know we'll be right here to support you every step of the way.
This podcast is part of J2's free live webinar, The Building Doctor Show. To attend the live show and ask your questions during the Q&A, visit www.j2consultants.com.